letter, they have not approved it and have cited sections of the law saying that they cannot approve it, that it's not possible to approve an amendment. So we just received this. We're still trying to figure out on a staff level how we can respond to it. So I don't have a course of action for you tonight. I did want to bring it to your attention and let you know that this liability still is something that I'm concerned about for the school district in the future, that they would have to use general fund monies potentially in order to pay the debt service of this loan that they can ill afford to pay. So we're going to be huddling with the attorneys over the next few days and trying to figure out how we can address this issue. Certainly we could address it legislatively, although I think that's a very difficult and time-consuming way to do it. There may also be one strategy that we're thinking about is maybe asking each individual taxing entity whether it would be willing to forego its portion of the loan payments, and that would be something that we would hope that the Department of Finance and this board would not need to approve. It could be just something between the school district and each taxing entity. So those are a couple of ideas, and there may be more that we'll bring back to you at the next meeting. In the meantime, for those of you who are on the city school committee, we'll also be having a discussion of this on Thursday night of this week, and by that time we may have some additional ideas about how to go forward.
Okay.
If I could just add to that, I did talk extensively with the staff at the Department of Finance related to this, and they really were on our side, and they were trying to find a way that the law would allow for this, and they just couldn't find the right statute. So they weren't, you know, they were seeing that this was the intent of the law.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Greg?
Yeah, I don't know if I was here for that meeting or not.
No, you weren't.
It just seems from the department's letter that, I mean, since I wasn't here for the discussion as to how we justified it, I don't see really how we could have. What was the, why did we think we could do this?
I didn't think we could. I didn't think that that there was a justification for completely forgiving the loan.
The justification that I recommended the approval of that loan to both the successor agency and to the oversight board was that the original loan was made from the redevelopment agency to the school district in order to capitalize payments that the agency was obligated to make to the school district. Those were statutory pass-through payments pursuant to AB 1290, so they're called 1290 payments, and they're made to all taxing entities. It was a requirement from the 1993 that redevelopment agencies share 25% of their tax increment revenues with all taxing entities. And we made a loan on the basis with the understanding of both parties that what we were doing was capitalizing those loan payments, or those 1290 payments, and that the obligation of the school district was limited to the 1290 payments, and that wouldn't go beyond that. It wouldn't require general fund support from the school district in order to make the loan payments. And as it's turned out, because of the recession, lowering of property values, that's not the case. That in fact, going forward, it's very likely that the school district will need to pay for general fund, out of the general fund, for a portion of the debt service necessary to repay this loan. So the spirit of the transaction was, we're taking redevelopment funds and we're helping our school district with it. And the spirit of the dissolution legislation adopted by the state was, we're eliminating redevelopment agencies to help our school districts. So it's entirely consistent in my mind with state policy, and that's why I recommended that the board adopt agreement. And that, in fact, is the spirit that I think, as Deborah mentioned, the Department of Finance realized we're trying to do that, but there was a technical issue of not being able to find a statutory basis to support that would satisfy the Department of Finance. So we're going to figure out a different strategy to it.
And what I recommend, as I recall too, Pat, part of the problem was I think the loan documents ended up saying explicitly that payments, the required payments, were not limited to the 57% pass-through, that it obligated explicitly the school district to pay from general funds if necessary in order to make the payment. Maybe I'm misremembering that, but I think we had a real hurdle there with the loan documents as they currently exist. What I recommended, and we just got this, and I've had very brief communication about it, but what I recommended as an alternative, and I think it's still possible, is that the loan could be amended. Now, that's an issue according to the DOF's letter, but I'll address that in a moment. That the loan could be amended so that payments are always capped at no more than the 57% pass-through. There's an obligation under this statute, the second statute that DOF cites, 34177F, yes, 34177F, which requires affirmatively that successor agencies collect on loans, because that's an asset that of the former agency that benefits taxing entities. So we need to collect. We also need to protect. There's a fiduciary duty to taxing entities. But if there is a amendment of the loan so that the payments are reduced, so we extend the term of it essentially, you're still collecting. And I would argue, and I think there's a decent argument about this right now, that given the time value of money, that money's not worth much right now. I mean, my CDs are probably still making less than 1% per year. That if you extend the payment terms, you're really not hurting or causing any harm or reducing the amounts that the taxing entities would receive. So that's one alternative. Now, DOF here cites another section, 34163C3, which says that the agency doesn't have authority to forgive or to make amendments, change the terms or conditions of existing loans. That section refers to actions of the former redevelopment agency, which is a distinct entity from the successor agency. I think they've misapplied that section. It doesn't apply here. I can find nothing looking, in all of a half an hour as I ran out the door this afternoon that says that the successor agency cannot amend a contract. They need to, when it comes before you, you need to think about protecting the taxing entities. That's your utmost priority, along with honoring enforceable obligations. But as long as you're doing that and you're still collecting on the loan, and if we hear that there's sympathy there, I think it's worth making a different structural approach and arguing that to DOF.
Well, let me throw out another. Yeah, it's possible, but at the meetings I do attend, I try to emphasize this is a highly technical thing that we're going through, and DOF has always had this attitude and is going to continue this attitude. And if we try to outguess public policy with DOF, we're going to lose. I was just thinking, and this is what brings me to the December 26th letter. I don't know if we've transferred that $21.2 million yet. I presume we haven't. But it can be done with some sort of document where they assume an obligation under certain conditions, so that we can say, okay, here's $21.2 million, but the last thing we want to do is to have the school district have to all of a sudden come up with this other money. Therefore, under conditions X, Y, and Z, if they occur, you will be guaranteeing the repayment of that money, and that the last $2.8 million should be held in some sort of trust until those conditions are satisfied, and that's just a condition of the transfer to protect the school district. And say, fine, you want the money, I understand that the Emeryville Center for Community Life is not the school district. Nonetheless, I think that they may be willing to, if we can itemize those conditions under which they will act as guarantor, that they will say, okay, fine, and we'll we'll see what to do with it. Because otherwise, I don't know that ultimately the school district couldn't face some sort of action on this, where DOF is coming in and standing in the shoes of the oversight board and bringing suit. And we don't want to go through that. So that's something else I'd like explored between now and then as to whether that could be done.
Well, I don't think there's anything that allows them to take the place of oversight board and commence litigation. I think that their power is that no action of the oversight board is permitted unless it's approved by DOF. So if we were to try to amend it to extend the payment or some other approach, we'd have to resubmit that to DOF, and if they say no, then unless the oversight board and the successor agency were interested in litigating it with the state, then that would be the end of it.
In the interest of staff time, I'm wondering if exploring your theory of how they've applied or misapplied the section could be clarified in a response to this letter, saying, we think it's been misapplied and we'd like to approach it this other way to give them a chance and to give them an ability to pre-approve it before we go through the process of bringing an item to both boards.
Yeah, I think we're stuck on their second site, personally. That's my read of it, that the second section that they refer to that says you've got to enforce former redevelopment agency rights. I mean, I don't think you can completely forgive the loan.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is before we go through the process of amending the loan, because we believe that their reading of our ability to amend is wrong, can we respond to this letter and say, this is our reading of the law, we'd like the ability to amend?
Well, I'm not sure that would be binding, and I'm all for efficiency,
Right.
and not wanting to go through a whole rigmarole and all just get the door slammed in our face again.
Right.
I think that I'm not sure it would be binding on them unless they were facing an actual set of facts. And I also think that we might want to consider, I think if we took another approach, we'd have a whole resolution. We just recently did this in Oakland in connection with the Army base, and we'll see how it works. You have a whole resolution that says, and because the Oversight Board finds that this law does not prohibit the successor agency from amending things as long as the taxing entities are protected or something to that effect. The board would make these findings, and you would lay it out for them in a way that would, frankly, that creates as much sympathy as you can in the record, both to try to appeal to them, but also to make your record if you did choose to litigate. So it would be an investment in something that would be different, that you'd be presenting to them, that would hopefully be more effective. But it could have the same result. So I appreciate you're looking for some way to test it in effect.
And we're not going to make a decision tonight. I'm very comfortable having staff review this, research it, and come back to us at the next meeting. I would just make one caution. If we know that the DOF is sympathetic to this, I wouldn't just dismiss having legislative action. Sometimes they can move real quickly.
I just also wanted to respond to the question of, I believe you're asking the question of who would enforce this agreement. And my conversations with the county auditor controller, since she is the one that is now administering the 1290 pass-through payments, I think she feels it's her obligation to enforce the agreement, and they would be sending demand payments to the school and be enforcing those payments or subtracting out any money that they would be forwarding to the school district to make that loan whole.
Okay. Any other comments? Moving on. Is there going to be closed session?